If you're watching this video, please give it a like. Subscribe to Instant Revenge. And share in the comments where you're hearing this story from. I'd love to know how far it's traveled. My farm, the one I had poured 43 years of my life into every dawn milking cows, every backbreaking harvest, every quiet evening watching the sun dip behind the apple orchard my late husband Frank had planted with his own calloused hands had been swallowed whole by a merciless summer wildfire. The flames came without warning. A roaring inferno that turned my farmhouse into a skeleton of charred beams, reduced the barn where I had raised generations of prize cattle to smoldering rubble, and left the orchard a graveyard of blackened stumps. I stood there amid the ashes, the acrid smoke still stinging my eyes and clinging to my hair and clothes, clutching a small duffel bag with the few possessions I had managed to salvage: a photograph of Frank and me on our wedding day, a handful of legal documents, and the clothes on my back. The insurance adjuster, a weary man with a clipboard, shook his head sympathetically and explained that processing the claim could take months, and even then, the payout might not cover half the cost of rebuilding. At 64 years old, with nothing but $217 in my checking account and the old pickup truck I had driven to town for supplies just before the fire started, I had nowhere to turn. Desperation clawed at my chest as I drove the familiar roads to my daughter Kaya's house, the pristine white door of her upscale home in Millbrook's exclusive woodlawn, estates gleaming like a beacon of false hope under the My fingers trembled as I knocked, the sound echoing too loudly in the quiet evening. When the door opened, there stood Kaya, my only child, dressed in a silk blouse that shimmered under the porch, light, a garment that probably cost more than I used to spend on groceries for an entire month back when I was scraping by, her perfectly manicured eyebrows arched in surprise, her gaze traveling from my soot-stained jeans to the duffel bag slung over my shoulder, taking in every detail of my disheveled, defeated appearance. "Mom, what are you doing here?" she asked, her voice carrying that edge of inconvenience I had grown painfully accustomed to over the years, as if my very presence was an unwelcome interruption to her carefully curated life. My throat tightened, but I forced the words out, explaining how the wildfire had destroyed everything: the farm, the home, the life I had built from nothing after Frank's death. "I lost it all, sweetheart," I said, my voice cracking despite my best efforts to hold it together. "I was hoping I could stay with you and Louie just for a few days, until I figure something out." Before Kaya could respond, her husband Louie appeared behind her like a shadow, his face contorting into an expression of pure horror as he surveyed me from head to toe. He stepped forward protectively, blocking the doorway with his broad frame. "Absolutely not," he declared flatly, his tone as cold and unyielding as a winter frost. "Look at you, you're covered in ash and God knows what else. You'll ruin my Persian rug. That thing costs $15,000. The words hit me like a physical blow, my cheeks burning with a shame I hadn't felt since my own impoverished childhood. I stammered that I could clean up first, shower, change, but he interrupted mercilessly. "What you need is to figure out your own problems," he said. "We have a certain lifestyle here. Image matters. I can't have a homeless woman sleeping on my couch when my business associates might drop by at any moment." "Homeless woman," he said it so casually, as if those two words encapsulated everything. I had become in his eyes not his mother-in-law, not the woman who had sacrificed sleep, health, and dreams to raise the daughter he professed to love, but just another disposable burden, a threat to his polished facade. Kaya shifted uncomfortably beside him, her designer heels clicking faintly on the marble threshold. But she said nothing to defend me, nothing to contradict her husband's cruelty. This was the child I had nursitated through pneumonia when she was 6, holding her feverish body through endless nights. The girl I had worked double shifts for, cleaning houses and waiting tables. to put through college so she could have the opportunities I never did. In a desperate whisper, I pleaded, I raised you. Kaya, I sacrificed everything for you. Doesn't that mean anything? For a fleeting second, something flickered in her eyes, guilt, perhaps, or a ghost of the regret she might one day feel. But then Louis placed a possessive hand on her shoulder, and it vanished as quickly as it had appeared. Mom, you have to understand our position, she said, her voice measured and detached, like she was reciting lines from a script she had rehearsed in her mind. We live in an exclusive neighborhood. Louis is right about appearances. Maybe you could try calling your sister in Portland, my sister in Portland, the one who hadn't spoken to me in 8 years. Ever since our bitter falling out over Frank's funeral arrangements. The one who had made it crystal clear that I was no longer welcome in her life. Kaya knew this history intimately, yet she suggested it anyway, as if banishing me to a non-existent refuge was easier than opening her own door. I managed a choked I see through the lump in my throat, unshed tears burning my eyes as I nodded in understanding. That went deeper than she could imagine. Louis was already closing the door, his final words tossed over his shoulder like crumbs to a beggar. I'm sure you'll figure something out. Ada, you always were resourceful. The decisive click of the latch echoed in my ears as I stood alone on their manicured porch, the evening chill seeping through my thin jacket. Through the frosted glass panels, I could make out their silhouettes moving away, no doubt returning to the expensive dinner they had been enjoying before my inconvenient arrival disrupted their perfect evening. For several long minutes, I remained frozen there, shock warring with a grief so profound it felt like drowning in an ocean of betrayal. This was my daughter, my flesh and blood, the little girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, clutching her stuffed bear and begging me to chase the monsters away. The child who had sobbed uncontrollably when I had to work late shifts at the diner just to keep food on the table and the lights on. Where had that innocent, dependent child gone? How had she transformed into this stranger who prioritized a rug over her own mother's survival? My phone buzzed in my pocket, jolting me from my stupor. It was a text from Kaya. Mom, I'm sorry, but Louis is right. Maybe this is the wake-up call you need to start planning for your future more responsibly. There are senior living facilities that might help. Senior living facilities. Polite code for anywhere but here, a dismissal. Wrapped in feigned concern, I walked numbly back to my pickup truck, the one relic that had survived the fire. My hands shaking so violently I could barely insert the key into the ignition. As I sat in the cab, the full weight of my predicament crashed over me like a tidal wave. 64 years old, homeless, rejected by my only family, with the nearest motel 30 miles away and barely enough money for a single night's stay, staring at their flawless house, the manicured lawn, the luxury cars in the driveway, the facade of success that hid such hollow hearts. Something inside me shifted. The crushing despair began to harden into a steely resolve, a quiet fury that had been simmering for years as I watched Kaya morph into someone I barely recognized, someone who embodied the very snobbery and materialism she had once resented in others during our struggling days. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts, my finger pausing on a name I hadn't dialed in 15 years. Thomas Peterson. Tommy, the boy from the rundown house next door. The son of the town drunks, whom I had treated like my own. Feeding him, helping with homework, giving him a safe haven when his world was chaos. Would he even remember me after all this time? Would a man who had reportedly built an empire in Silicon Valley care about an old farm woman in her hour of need? But as I hovered over the call button, a realization dawned. Kaya had just made the gravest mistake of her life. She had no idea who she had turned away, the connections I still held in secret. Some bridges, once burned, could never be rebuilt, and she had just struck the match that would consume everything. Sitting in that dimly lit parking lot outside Kia's house, the floodgates of memory opened wide. Each recollection a sharp twist of the knife in my heart, reminding me of the endless sacrifices I had made for a daughter who had now discarded me without a second thought. I remembered the day Frank died suddenly of a heart attack, leaving 12-year-old Kaya devastated, crying so hard at the funeral that she made herself violently ill. I held her all night in that narrow hospital bed, her small body racked with sobs and vomiting from sheer grief, whispering promises that everything would be okay even as panic clawed at my own insides. Frank's life insurance barely covered the burial costs, and the farm was drowning in debt. I had a grieving preteen who needed stability more than ever. So I did what any devoted mother would. I worked 3 jobs, 7 days a week, breakfast shifts at Murphy's Diner, where the smell of grease permeated everything, afternoons cleaning the sprawling homes of the wealthy families on the hill, scrubbing floors on my hands and knees, and night shifts at the textile factory whenever they were available, operating noisy machines until my fingers bled. Kaya never knew about the nights I collapsed into bed, tears streaming down my face from sheer exhaustion, wondering if I was strong enough to hold our fragile world together. She never saw me skipping meals, surviving on peanut butter sandwiches so there would be money for her new school, clothes, or extracurricular activities. She was just a child. She shouldn't have had to bear that knowledge. But what shattered me most in hindsight was how her attitude toward me began to change during those years. She started looking at me with embarrassment, as if my calloused hands, my tired eyes, and the faint scent of diner grease on my skin made me lesser than the other mothers who drove sleek cars and hosted playdates in spotless kitchens. By the time she was 16, she stopped bringing friends home altogether. It's just easier to hang out at their houses, Mom, she would say with a shrug. But I knew the truth. Their homes were grander, their mothers more refined, and I was the kind of parent she didn't want her peers to see. I should have been furious at her ingratitude, but instead, I pushed myself harder, sacrificing my own aspirations, dreams of traveling, of pursuing a hobby, of simply resting to give her the life those other kids had. The irony stung now like salt in an open wound. All those years of striving to elevate her above our circumstances, and she had grown up to become exactly like the people who had once looked down on us, prioritizing status over substance. But woven through these painful memories was another thread. Another child whose story was inextricably linked to ours in ways Kaya had never fully appreciated or acknowledged. Tommy Peterson, the boy next door in the sagging, paint-peeled house where shouts and breaking glass were nightly symphonies. His parents were the town's open secret, the drunks everyone whispered about but no one confronted. When Tommy was 8, he started showing up at our kitchen door around dinner time, always with some contrived excuse. My mom wanted to know if you had any extra sugar, or can I pet your cats? Or my dad says, do you need help with anything? But the truth was etched into his scrawny frame, his 2 large second-hand clothes, and the hollow hunger in his eyes, not just for food, but for kindness, for normalcy, for a place where raised voices didn't prelude violence. Frank saw it first, peering out the window one evening, as Tommy sat alone on his splintered front steps. That boy needs looking after, Frank said quietly. His folks aren't right. After Frank's death too, Tommy became my shadow, appearing every morning before school to help with farm chores without being asked, feeding the chickens, gathering eggs, mucking out stalls even when I returned from my shifts, too weary to stand. One afternoon, I found him elbow deep in manure. That was supposed to be my task. You don't have to do this, sweetheart, I told him. But he just shrugged with that simple wisdom. I like helping. Besides, you take care of everyone else. Someone should take care of you too. At 9 years old, he understood reciprocity, loyalty, and chosen family in a way that eluded many adults. Tommy never whined about his home life. Never begged me to intervene with social services, though in retrospect, I should have. On the worst nights, when the yelling next door escalated to crashes and screams, I would discover him curled up in our barn by morning. Having sought refuge among the hay and animals, he did his homework at my kitchen table while I cooked. And I always set an extra plate for Sunday dinners or family movie nights. Insisting to a reluctant Kaya that he needed us. Sometimes we're the family people choose. Not just the one they're born into, I would tell her. But she would roll her eyes and retreat to her room. Already at 12 or 13, deeming Tommy beneath her because of his poverty, his threadbare clothes, and his parents' reputation. Yet I saw the spark in him. A fierce intelligence that formal schooling couldn't contain. At 15, he taught himself computer programming from dog-eared library books. At 16, he was repairing neighbors' computers for pocket money. By 17, he spoke passionately about escaping our small town for college. Our final heartfelt conversation was on my front porch the night before. He left for MIT on a full scholarship. That stunned our high school counselor. We shared a thermos of coffee, watching the sunset bleed orange and pink across the sky. I wouldn't have made it without you, Miss Ada, he said softly. You know that, right? I squeezed his hand. You would have found a way, Tommy. You're stronger than you know. Maybe, he conceded, but you gave me something I never had before, real family. That was 15 years ago. Initial Christmas. Cards and letters from college gave way to sporadic contact as life pulled us apart. Town gossip mentioned his graduation from MIT, a move to Silicon Valley, starting his own company, but I paid little heed, focused on my own struggles. Now, in the truck's dim glow, staring at Thomas Peterson in my contacts, I weighed the irony. 2 children raised under my roof, one by blood, who had just proven that biology meant nothing when inconvenience arose, the other by choice, who might yet demonstrate what true family entailed. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped the phone. 15 years since hearing his voice, and here I was calling at my absolute lowest. What if he had forgotten? The woman who made him peanut butter sandwiches and checked his math homework. What if his new life of success and important circles left no room for an old farm lady's crisis? But with the truck growing colder and the motel clock ticking, I pressed call before courage failed. It rang once, twice, 3 times, my hope sinking with each until a deeper, more mature voice answered. Hello. Recognition flooded me. Tommy. This is Ada Morrison from next door. The shift was instantaneous. Electric. Miss Ada. Oh my God, are you okay? Is everything all right? He remembered not just my name, but me, and his first instinct was concern. Tears streamed unchecked as I apologized for the out-of-blue call, acknowledging the years and his likely family and responsibilities. Stop, he said firmly yet gently. Don't you dare apologize. You can call me anytime, anywhere, for anything. You know that. Now, tell me what's wrong. So I did. The words tumbling out in a torrent. The wildfire's destruction. Losing the farm. Begging at Kaya's door only to be turned away like a vagrant. Louis labeling me homeless. Kaya's silent complicity, having nowhere to go. He listened without interruption, murmuring empathy and rising indignation. When I finished, a heavy pause made my stomach knot. Had I overstepped? But then, Miss Ada, that woman is not the little girl you raised. What Kaya did tonight is unforgivable. His protective ferocity echoed the teenage boy who once defended me against schoolyard taunts about my multiple jobs and second-hand attire. She's still my daughter, I protested weakly, the words ringing hollow even to me. No, Tommy countered with quiet conviction. A daughter doesn't abandon her mother. A daughter doesn't call the woman who sacrificed everything for her homeless. You know what you are to me, Miss Ada. You're the only mother I ever really had. And no mother of mine is spending the night in a shelter or her car. My breath hitched. Tommy, I wasn't calling to ask for money, or I know you weren't, he interjected. That's exactly why I'm going to help you. Where are you right now? Still outside Kaya's, in my truck. It sounds like you're in shock, which is understandable. Are you safe to drive? I thought so. Good. There's a Marriott about 20 miles north on Route 9. Do you know it? Yes. The venue of Kaya and Lewis's wedding reception. You're not paying for anything. I'm booking you a suite right now. Get there, order room service, take a hot bath, and try to sleep. Can you do that for me? The extravagance overwhelmed me, but his tone brooked no argument. You took care of me when I had nothing. Now it's my turn. His voice softened. Besides, you're going to need rest for tomorrow. Tomorrow? I'm flying out first thing. I'll be there by noon. From San Francisco, 3,000 miles away. The notion of him dropping everything seemed surreal. You don't have to come all this way. I just needed a friendly voice. Miss Ada, do you remember what you told me the night before I left for college? The porch, the coffee, the sunset. You said family takes care of family no matter what. When someone you love is hurting, you don't hesitate or make excuses, you show up. I whispered that I remembered. Well, I'm showing up. And there's something else. A weighted pause. The company I started after MIT, it's done pretty well. Actually, better than well. I'm not just comfortable, Miss Ada. I'm wealthy. Very wealthy. How wealthy? Forbes, $2.8 billion last year. The phone nearly slipped from my grasp. The boy in Frank's hand me. A billionaire. Every success, every dollar, every achievement, it all started in your kitchen. You gave me the foundation. Tomorrow, a conversation with Kaya and Lewis. They would learn who they rejected. You're never worrying about a roof again. I'm taking care of you the way you took care of me, Tommy. I don't need billions, I know. That's why you deserve them. For 15 years, I've wondered how to repay you for saving my life. Tomorrow, I get the chance. Hanging up and driving to the Marriott, one thought looped. Kaya had refused shelter to the woman who raised a billionaire, who still called her mom. She was about to discover some mistakes were irreversible. Waking in luxury Egyptian cotton sheets, marble bathroom, breathtaking mountain views. I momentarily forgot, then remembered. Tommy called at 9:47. I just landed. Be there in 20. I landed as if he piloted it himself, which he likely did, suggesting we visit Kaya first. The helicopter's roar drew lobby stares as it landed on the lawn. Tommy emerged, transformed in a bespoke suit, exuding quiet power, but his hug and smile were the boys I knew. Look at you. All grown up, thanks to you. The 5-minute flight landed in a park opposite Kaya's neighbors emerging as we approached. Kaya and Louie gawked. Tommy introduced me as his mother, revealing his identity, recounting my sacrifices for him while they turned me away. Deed to a 7-bedroom estate on 10 acres. $25 million trust. Anything she needs, she gets. Kaya's protests crumbled under his declaration. Chosen family trumps blood when loyalty falters. As we lifted off, pity filled me for Kaya. Diminished in her yard, unaware of her irretrievable loss. The mansion was a dream colonial with pillars, wrap-around porches, staff Maria, Frank, Alina treating me royally. Adjusting to luxury daily flowers, tailored meals. Shopping, I felt like a fairy tale character. Tommy visited frequently. Porch talks recreating old times. Kaya arrived weeks later, admitting error, offering their guest room, but probing exposed motives tied to wealth. Her raw confession, shame of our poverty. Panic at my reminder lead to honest rejection of past dynamics. Decide what daughter you want to be, I said, embracing self-prioritization. 6 months on. Thriving painting, volunteering, literature classes. Foundation board. Kaya's calls went unanswered amid her downfall. Lewis's failures, divorce, Her diner job. Foundation gala triumphs. Tommy's devotion reinforced my worth. Some endings bring acceptance, not reconciliation living, valued by chosen family. What would you do? Share experiences. City. Explore other stories. Thank you.